Yeah, so
Hey, we got the MMA Museum podcast back. I'm Miguel Iturati, and we are on another one of our long deep dive interviews. I got my partner and sidekick, Todd Atkins. And let me tell you, folks, I have no doubt in my mind that we are interviewing a Hawaiian fighting legend, and that is Ronald Machine Gun Jhun. Ronald, a 50 fight veteran. That's what it says on the internet. I bet you've got more than 50 fights, so there's probably a
I
few
mean,
that are
give
not
or take,
documented.
yeah, I mean, 50 something documented, but a lot of it is undocumented. So, I mean, back in that time, we didn't have internet and YouTube and all that. So, a lot of fights was recorded. I mean, they got most of it, but there was a lot of street fights. Maybe as my amateur career,
Well, yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about because the internet now gives you a little bit of a history, and it says that
yes.
you started out kind of as a street fighter, and then you were obviously with the Jesus is Lord team, a kind of a legendary Hawaii team that became the 808 Fight Club. But talk about growing up as a kid, because Hawaii is one of those places that, if you grow up there, it can be rugged, it can be tough. So talk about growing up as a kid. You were a street fighter. You like to scrap.
I mean, let's just say it was like part of our culture. I mean, going to school, if you didn't stand up for yourself, you get your lunch money taken away. And then that was a good thing because here in Hawaii, I mean, these was your weapon. We didn't have really guns and whatnot. I mean, it was pretty much either you scrap or you just got bullied. You know what I mean?
Okay,
So
okay, and that's
that
cool though.
was
You avoided like the hardcore guns and knives and stuff like that. You settled, with your fists.
yeah. I mean, that was our way of making friends because some I tell you what, man, there was a lot of guys on the street that was some bad dudes, man. I mean, if they learned a little bit of the ground and some wrestling, they would did good as well in MMA. So they just didn't like the ground stuff because I mean the mainland guys were advanced in on that sense when it came to fighting. If you just get this local boy down to the ground, you got him. So
Yeah.
that was just grew up.
Now, were you a disciplined guy, or were you just a street fighter, or did you do the police athletic league boxing and technique stuff even when you were young?
I mean, growing up, my uncle Peter John was a boxing trainer. He trained boxers. My dad boxed a little when he was here. He didn't do anything professionally. Um, and I basically just trained in a garage hitting bag. You know what I mean? But ultimately, I was just a street fighter, man. High school, played football, wrestled growing up as a little kid. I mean, played football, and that was pretty much my athletic background.
Okay.
You know, so
Now, when I look at the internet, it says that your first official kind of pro fight was Super Brawl 8. Let's start before that. How did you become aware of Super Brawl? And then before Super Brawl, I think the show was called Future Brawl, and it was in a bar, and then it went to the Blaisdell Arena. Like, how did you start to watch that and become involved in that? How did you get approached by them?
well, we like anyone else, man. I made some bad choices in my life. Um, Ended up going to church, and with my brother-in-law Ray Cooper, them, and then we met Kavika Louis, who I believe was fighting in the future brawls for TJ at Gussie Lamore's. So we saw him at church, and he spoke with Ray, and yes, they have a conversation talking about where we were training at. And he told him at the time he was at Waipahu High School. So Kavika was telling him that he's getting ready for a fight in the Blaisdell, Super Brawl 1. And that's how this whole thing started, man. I mean, and my wife kind of didn't want me to be around violence or whatnot. I was trying to get my life right and trying to walk a straight line. So I didn't go to his fight. But I believe in Super Brawl 3, TJ was asking Kavika who you training with. He told him Ray Cooper. And he said, where they at? So TJ came to our gym and he saw my brother-in-law, and he told him if he wanted to fight in the next Super Bowl, which was Super Bowl 3, I believe. And I ended up cornering him. So that's how the story started, man. I mean, once I was in his corner, I was like, I wanna try this, man. You know what I mean? Kind of got me excited inside.
Cool.
Ron, maybe tell them about Kavika, because if there's an MMA like a tree, I would say Kavika's at the bottom of that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Kavika is pretty much, I mean, he's the guy that got everyone started. I mean, he was I remember Kavika's 1 year older than me. So I remember seeing him in high school. He was a state champ wrestler from Waianae. So he was already a state football player. I mean, high school standout in wrestling and football. So he was already doing this underground fighting before everybody. So he was pretty much the guy that started it. And that was the rest is history, man.
And you met him in church.
Yes. At Rhode Life Christian Center.
And because that's one of the things that always stood out about the Hawaiian guys is very rugged. You don't want to mess with them. You don't want to mess with these guys in the street either, you know, that kind of thing. But that you did have that kind of religious discipline too, you know. Talk about how that was an influence early, because you said that you made some bad decisions. So you were trying to stay out of trouble on the streets and you found the martial arts. Talk about all that and how Kawika influenced you.
Well, I mean, in Hawaii here, because of the cost of living and everything, everybody's born and raised. You go to school, either you go off to play college or you end up working construction. That's your two options. And I already had it set in my mind I wasn't gonna go to college. So I already had in my mind set that I was gonna start working construction. And at the time I was dating my wife, who's now, we're dating in high school, so that's my high school sweetheart.
That's cool too.
And she's still with me. We're still together to this day, 5 kids later and 7 grandkids. So
I gotta say, just before you continue, a ton of respect for that. A ton. Because there are not too many people get into this business and have their marriages survive. There are a few guys. I interviewed what's the name of the wrestler? Joe, whose son is doing real great in high school.
Joe Stevenson?
Stevens is another guy, I think, who's with his family. But no, this is Joe. I'll look it up. I'll look it up. He's a Midwest guy. He's got like 80 fights. And his son's his son's going to Oklahoma State. No, he's a little guy, 135. I'll find him so we get the name right. But very few guys are still with their original woman. And usually if the marriages break up, it's usually our fault, the guy's fault, especially when you live the lifestyle and stuff. So much respect for still being with your family and still putting it together, for sure. That's my hat's off to you. It's a strong man right there.
Thank you, man. I mean, hey, any strong man has got to have a good woman behind him. You know what I mean? So she was my rock. Yeah, she was the one that kept me in line. So I gotta give all props to her.
I think Ray Cooper's the same way, wasn't he, with Monica forever?
Yeah. Yes. Monica and Ray's been together. I guess since when he went to college, because he went off to, I believe it was North Dakota, and wrestled for a season. And then there was dating, and he got homesick and came home. You know, and that's how we started wrestling again, because he came back from college, and I guess he wanted somebody to throw around. So I was his practicing dummy.
That's cool. So Ray's a family member by marriage, then?
Yes. He's my wife and Ray's wife are sisters.
Gotcha.
My wife is the older sister, and his wife is the younger, 1 year younger than my wife.
So talk about the experience of going to you never went to the Future Brawls in the little bar?
No, I mean, we heard about it, but at the time when the Future Brawls was going on, I was me, Kai, and the rest of his other classmates. We was all playing in a football league. I don't know if you heard about it that time, Todd. It was a touch tackle, they called it. And we played in the championship games, we played in the Aloha Stadium right before the Pro Bowl. So it was basically what it the name was, touch tackle. You go in for somebody and it's a two-hand touch, but if they're running and you run into them and you tackle them, I mean, if it's unintentional, then it's not a foul. So it was basically tackle football with no helmet and no pads.
Cool.
Like yeah,
So
almost like
just to clear it up, the guy I was referring to, good family man from the Midwest, is Joe Jordan, who fought Cola Coca down in Super Brawl.
Jordan. Yes, I remember
back in the day. So a good man, and he's putting his kids at Oklahoma or Oklahoma State, I believe, wrestling. He's one of the #1 recruits in the country. So my hat's off to the guys that were able to keep that together. I wasn't able to keep a marriage together.
yeah,
so,
it's always the man's fault.
yeah, for sure. So now but talk about then the experience of, you said you cornered Ray in Super Brawl 3. Now, Super Brawl 3, for people who are not aware, was at the Blaisdell Arena. There were a huge crowd. This was not bar fighting anymore. TJ had definitely taken it to the next level. Ray, I believe, fought in a tournament, which was a 4-man tournament where, he won 2 fights, including a fight in the finals against Pat Miletich. I know Pat had a really tough first fight, and he was, really exhausted and in bad shape. But anyway you cut it, this guy was UFC champion. Ray Cooper put himself on the map immediately. Talk about that whole experience. 2 fights in one night, cornering, you immediately want to do it. I could just tell.
Yeah, it was something new. You could just feel the adrenaline in the place, and Hawaii fans, Todd can attest to this, man. Hawaiian fans, they want to see blood, man. It was a total blood sport back then. That's why the state was trying so hard to ban the sport. They said it was barbaric. I believe after that Super Brawl, TJ took the Super Brawl off the islands. There was one Super Brawl, 1, 2, 3 was here in Hawaii. And I believe he went Texas, Guam, California, and then Super Brawl 8. In 1998, he came back. That was Super Brawl 8. And,
okay, so you guys were under real pressure then.
Yeah, I mean, the state legislature was out for the sport and didn't want it. So we ended up.
No, go ahead.
No, so we ended up, because it was called no holds bar. It was like basically no rules, because you could stomp a person's face, you could soccer kick them. It was basically pride rules at that time. So I mean, that's why I thought it was kind of interesting. It was almost like a street fight, and the referee wasn't even standing by you. He was against the rope and just watching it.
Yeah,
like pretty much Steve English was like asking from far away, "You done? You good? Like, you know what I mean? You give up?" I mean, and wasn't even knowledgeable of what was going, because he was an arm wrestler, right, Todd?
Yeah,
so
he was.
Didn't know all the submission though, so you could have had your arm snapped, and he would ask you if you're okay, and it's pretty much up to you to say, "I want to go," or "I'm done, man. I think my arm's broke." That's how it was back then. So I thought that was exciting.
So now, what'd you think though? Because now you're in the corner, and UFC champion kind of thing, and like you said, the mainland guys bought the ground game. Did that concern you a little bit? And then, did you ever get a chance to go ahead and train with like the Inoue brothers and some of the other guys? Because Hawaii would later, in the future years, you'd get BJ Penn out of there and stuff. And you guys had your own special ground guys too. But in the beginning, was it scary?
Kavika trained for some, I don't know if it was 6 months to a year, but he trained at House and Gracie's. And I guess learned the basic arm bar, triangle, sweeps. And that's the stuff he just showed us. How to sweep, how to set up triangles, how to set up arm bars and foot locks and whatnot. And we just drilled them. We drilled that with the wrestling takedowns and takedown defenses. So we basically had the basic fundamentals covered. So knowing that, I mean, with the striking that was working and whatnot, with the boxing and kickboxing, I mean, I felt we was pretty prepared at the time to
Yep.
get in there and defend ourselves.
Now, Helson obviously he had the reputation of being, uh, one of the street fighting Gracies too, like a real hardcore guy. Kind of fits right in with the Hawaiian mentality, I think. Did you ever run
Yeah.
into the Inoue brothers, Ensign and Egan?
No, I mean we cross trained with Ensign, Egan Inouye a few times. Went to Grappling Unlimited and cross trained with his guys with Sheldon Young and John Crisosimo and Fish and all their guys who fought in Super Brawl. So I mean, we went up there and I felt like we was at that stage where it wasn't like we was a small fish in a big pond. We kind of like was holding our own. So I felt like
Good.
what we was doing was on the right path.
Now, I wanted to ask you, was part of your motivation, especially in some of these international fights and fights, where TJ was bringing in big people and stuff, was some of your motivation like you felt like you were representing Hawaii, like a pride in your state and your background?
Oh, I mean, most definitely. I mean, when I went out there, I went out there with the intention that I'm representing the islands. I'm representing my family. I'm representing my job. I used to bring hundreds and hundreds of people. I mean, 100 tickets was minimum for me, for just sell. And then I used to always ask TJ, hey, I need another 50. I need another 100. And I would just be selling tickets. So TJ knew that I could bring people into the arena, which is why I was on so many fight cards. And when I went out there, I just fought to the death. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I know TJ relatively well. He visited I used to be with Hook and Shoot, if you remember the old Hook and Shoot show in
Yes, yes.
Indiana. And he came to visit us a little bit, a couple of times, and I worked more with Monty than with TJ. But TJ is a good man. He knows what he knows a lot about the sport, but if there's one thing he likes is his money too. So if you're a ticket seller, I know he took care of you.
Well, at that time, there was no internet where you could go on social media and all that. So radio was something that was big down here. So when we'd be at work, you would just hear it blowing up like, hey, this week or next week, whenever the date was, Super Brawl, and you hear TJ's voice, and then we got Ray Brother Cooper, we got Ron the Machine Gun. I mean, this thing would be blowing up on the radio all day at work, all the stations. So that's when my phone be called buzzing and everybody be calling, yeah, I like tickets, man. But Hawaii people is all last minute. I'll have about 100 people calling me up the day of the fight. Like, hey, I need tickets. And me, I'm dealing with tickets. And my wife's telling me, like, hey, you got to stop doing this, man. I got to take care of my family. I got to take care of it. She's like, hey, you got to fight for ticket. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
it's funny. I'll tell you a story. I was able to book Eddie Alvarez, who later won a UFC title.
right.
I booked like his first 15 fights, or first 10 fights were with me. And this kid, he's a street kid from Philly. He used to sell tickets like a drug dealer. Like he had his brother in his neighborhood, and they would go to this neighborhood and this neighborhood with a lock box and the money in the box and stuff. And he would show up literally with $30,000 in tickets sold for the promoter. So it was crazy. And I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think you probably would have done better with getting help instead of doing it yourself on the day of the fight.
In fact, that's a good point of making that, because that's what I felt like. I was walking around with a fanny pack with a fat wad of 100, and I'll be looking around like passing out the ticket and collecting money like I was a drug dealer.
Yeah, for sure. Now, so now we get to Super Brawl 8. You're ready to go. There's something weird on Sherdog, and maybe it's just Sherdog, but they got you fighting twice, and the first fight's an amateur fight, which probably means you didn't get paid, and the second fight's a pro fight. So what went on? Is there anything to that, or is it just a Sherdog mistake? Because you fought twice on Super Brawl 8, Eddie Millis and then Eugene Jackson.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. They had me down because Eddie Millis was the owner and head trainer of Shark Tank, and he was walking around, and we wasn't really informed about who we were fighting. We just went to the weigh-ins and weighed in, and all I know, it was a 4-man tournament. So I guess what they did was they took the two guys who was in the closer to weight and made them fight, and then the winners would end up fighting each other. So I guess me and Eddie Mills was closer in weight, like 198, 199, and Eugene Jackson and the other local kid was Dustin Dennis or Dustin, I forget his last name. I know his name was Dustin. He was training with Grappling Unlimited. He ended up fighting Eugene Jackson on the other side of the bracket. But I didn't even know I was fighting Eddie Mills, because he was walking on and talking to everyone like he was a governor. And then he asked me, "Hey, bro, who you fighting?" I said, "Oh, I don't know, some mainland guy." And when I get into the ring and I'm waiting, he comes walking out with all his students, like the Gracies. He was holding his shoulder, and I'm like looking, and I see Eddie Mills in the front of the line. And I'm thinking like, "Hey, is this the guy I'm fighting?" And then he gets into the ring, and I'm thinking, "Yeah, that's the guy. I just was talking to him like a couple hours ago." And that was crazy. But he kicked me 2 good kicks, and I took him down to the ground, man. It was a ground fight after that.
Yeah. Now you got him early. You did your job. So you no nerves or were you feeling butterflies? Because like you said, you had some street fights and stuff like that. A lot of times that helps. Once you focus. Talk about your mindset heading into that first fight.
I tell you one thing: you can train fight scenarios and get mentally and physically prepared, but it's nothing to prepare you for the crowd, the intensity of the crowd, and just that pressure that you go through. Because at practice, it's a mild setting where people ain't yelling, and you it's a controlled environment. When you get into an uncontrolled environment, it kind of puts a little pressure on you. You see family members, you see family and friends, and then sometimes it's pressure you put on yourself. Like going out there and I gotta perform, I gotta win. You start thinking about a lot of stuff. Hey, I might get knocked out. A lot of things going through your head. But I think the more focused you are, and I think with me going church at the time and that peace that we had, because we used to pray before we came out, I think that is one of the things that got me through a lot of fights, just having that peace. And but once you get hit, I mean, it's game on already. I'm just zoned in already.
Got you.
So
Nice. And now I looked it up. It's Dustin Dawson.
Dustin Dawson. Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Now there was something interesting because
he got choked way out in that, man. Eugene Jackson was like yoked to hell, man. He was.
Yeah, Eugene Jackson was.
He put a choke on him so fast, like he was unconscious.
Felt like he was on something. So he grabbed a hold of me.
Yeah.
Felt like a boa constrictor.
Yeah,
and his fight was only in seconds, maybe I think 11 or 13 seconds or something like that. So I was like, "Oh, I gotta get this fight over," and our fight went almost the whole 5 minutes. Yeah, I think it was
Yeah, you fought 3 minutes and 50 seconds with Eddie Mills.
Yeah.
And then you got Eugene Jackson in the next round. And Eugene is a guy that, we later saw in the UFC. I didn't do Eugene any favors. I booked him to fight Vanderlei Silva in Brazil. And
I seen that one.
It didn't go that well for him. I was there with him for that one. But Eugene would qualify as a pro and a guy. I think you would actually fight him a lot later on as well. But talk about that, because he's a mainland guy. He had an easy first fight. What's your mindset going in? What's your team telling you about, can you win? Are you nervous? Are you thinking, all right, I'm going to go 1-1? What's your mindset heading into this one?
Well, I really don't think in my mind that losing was an option. You know what I mean? I'm just thinking I'm going to go out there, but tournament style, it's a whole different animal, because you go through a fight, your adrenaline is high, and depending if you're in shape or out of shape, dictates your next fight. You know what I mean? Because once I came back, the adrenaline went down. It kind of dropped, so I kind of got to get myself psyched up again. So it was kind of one of those things, and then Kavika ended up giving me some aspirins or some pills to wake me up, and I think that was the worst thing I think I did, taking something that I normally don't take, and I think I got choked out from Eugene Jackson, and he said it wasn't even hard that when he had his forearm on my neck, but I think it was probably from the pills that I take that made me go out. But I thought I was at home sleeping.
Okay.
You know, when I woke up, I thought the fight just was starting because my brother-in-law was in the corner looking at me. He's telling me, "Hey, it's over." And I was in the corner. "Hey, let's go. He goes, "No, the fight's over, man. You got choked out." And I was like, "Huh?" I remember walking out. I remember coming into the cage. I was in the corner, and I started thinking, "Yeah, you might be right. I think we did fight because I remember seeing Robert Kekaula looking at me on the ground. Then bits and pieces started coming back. So I was like, And I saw the video. Then it all came back after I saw the fight, and I was like, okay. I get the next one.
Okay, now every once in a while you get a guy. You fought twice in one night. This is your first experience in the ring, the pro, everything. You know you'd seen your brother-in-law fight. You were around the game. There are a lot of people that try it and then they're like, oh, I'll train, I'll be a teacher, but I'm not fighting again. Was that ever a thought in your mind?
You know what? Because of the time I used to go work, and then after work I would go and drink and party. So when I transitioned over to the fighting, that was my drinking. I would go to the gym. That was my downtime. So I worked during the day and I trained at night every day. So that was my new, how you would say, my new high, because after that fight, I just wanted to get better and better. And you know what I mean? The next time I was telling myself, that's not going to happen. I'm going to be more prepared the next time I come into the ring.
Okay. Now, as we said, TJ, a real, at this point, your next fights are Super Brawl 11. So now he's got a good body of shows under his belt, a real international show. At this point, they're at the peak of their powers. You go into another tournament, you fight and you beat a guy named Paul Cutts, and then you run into a guy named James Zickick, a British guy, in the finals of Super Brawl 11. And then there's a rematch real fast. So there's got to be a story behind this. What happened there? What's going on? And Zickick, what I know about him is he's a Lee Murray type street British tough guy. You know what I mean? Street, not a cool guy to run into in this thing. A very cocky guy and a very kind of a gangster type. So tell us about the whole experience here, and we'll talk about the rematch. But first, that first meeting with Zickick.
Well, he had a fairly fast win, I believe, on his fight, and then I had a fast win on my fight. And then when we fought in the finals, I felt like I was winning the fight, and he caught me with one good soloplex shot. I believe it was with a knee. And the whole fight turned from that point. I took him down, and I think he had a guillotine on me. I got out. I'm sorry, man. I might have forgot.
It's okay.
I think he choked me out, right? You remember that fight, Todd?
It says rear naked choke, yeah.
Yeah, so he ended up mounting me. I turned my back, he choked me out. So I felt like I could have beat this guy if it wasn't for the tournament. So I told TJ I want a rematch with this guy, just a single fight. So TJ said, "You got it." So he booked it right away on the next one.
Okay.
So we did the rematch, and I changed up my whole game for him because it was a person that had kicks, which told me that I needed to do more kickboxing and kickboxing defense. And I switched my style to a southpaw. I totally changed my style against him, and I think we were making up stuff as we was going because I was one of those fighters. I'd come out in the first round. I would say I was a slow fighter, especially with those high level guys. And I would kind of study your moves and your attacks on me, and I would change it up in a fight and make adjustments. So
Yeah.
I felt my fight IQ was a little above average.
Yeah, no, and you know, to give you some credit, you're not a bad athlete either. You know what I mean? Because you can't make in-ring adjustments if you're a slouch. You know what I mean?
Right.
So this is also a testament to TJ taking care of a ticket seller here. You know, because you lost that first fight, and you know what? My hat's off to James Zickett because a lot of guys don't need to give you a rematch. You know, he beat you. You know, so my hat's off for him to come back. Although the trip to Hawaii is nice, he came back, and you got your win in a single fight. Talk about the difference because you fought 2 tournaments, 2 fights in one night, and now a single fight. Was it easier? Was there more pressure? Because the other shows you went 1-1. You won, you lost. You know, you're adjusting. Well, talk about fighting a single fight versus a tournament.
Yeah, the tournament style, it is a different scenario because if you win, you got multiple fights. But a single fight, you got one guy, you know who you're fighting, you know his style, so you know what he brings to the table. So it's one hard fight. You can go all out with this guy. You don't need to worry about saving yourself for another possible opponent. So in a sense, starting off with a tournament style versus the one single fight in the night, I felt a little easier versus a tournament style. But the tournament style really tests you mentally because you got to get yourself up mentally and physically.
Okay.
That's the difference. Yeah.
Yep. Now, here in this situation, your next fight is against a guy named Marcus Da Silva, and I'm gonna assume here that this was a little bit of a different challenge. You're facing in the other shows you're facing Eugene Jacks, who came, James Zickett, who came a long way. And these guys are coming into your hometown. You got the fans and the crowd and stuff like that. Was Marcos Da Silva a different challenge? Was he a jiu-jitsu guy? What do you remember about him? Because I'm looking at his opponents, and though he doesn't have a great record, promoters didn't have any problem putting him in with top shelf guys. He had fought Akihiro Gono. Later on in his career, he fought, Vernon Tiger White from the Lions Den, fought David Terrell, who is basically Nick and Nate Diaz's mentor. Egan Inoue, a Hawaiian fighting legend. So what was this fight like? Because he's a guy that a lot of people don't remember, but he sounds and looks like a real tough guy. What do you remember?
He was a ground specialist. I mean, I think so. We stood up. There was no exchange. He took me down right away. So he was strictly jiu-jitsu. And it was a perfect fight at the time because I was getting married the next day. So my wife was like, "You sure you gonna do that?" I said, "I already told TJ I was doing it." So she said, "You better not get punched in the face and get a black eye for pictures." But it was basically a grappling jiu-jitsu match. That's what it was, man.
Yeah, he was pretty respected. He fought in Shuto and stuff. He fought a lot of tough guys.
Yeah, all tough guys. Yeah. His entire record is littered with top-notch guys, including yourself, Ron. But this guy, he's another classic example of a guy. You look at his record, and maybe it's upside down a little bit, but every single guy he fought is a name and a big name. Mm-hmm. So now, Ron, you've been going win-loss, win-loss, win-loss. Where's your confidence level at? Do you think are you feeling like you're getting better? Because you're about to go on a good winning streak here, but do you think you're getting better? Do you think you want to keep doing this, or where's your mindset? This is back still in 1999.
I think you learn more from your losses or your shortcomings. So every time when I won one, I go back to the gym, train. I get into another fight, I lose, and it just tells me that I need to work more on my ground it just tells you of all of your weak points and where you need to focus on more your energy to. So it just told me I needed to work more on my ground submission, my ground scrambles, and just being more aware of submission setups. That was what I needed to work on.
Okay. Now here's an interesting thing. You fought in a couple of tournaments and you went 1-1, and then you went 1-1. Now you finally break through and you win a tournament. You get the tournament win. How did that feel? Because you fought Super Bowl 14. This is November of '99, and I assume it's in Blaisdell Arena. And you fought Skip McNeil, and you a guy we have mentioned already, John Crisostomo, who was another one of those guys that isn't going to be remembered that by everybody, but it was definitely a tough guy for the era. What do you remember about this show?
Yeah, that fight was in Guam. So,
Oh, okay.
I believe the main event was John Calvo. And I would like to say Dan Severn.
Okay, I'm gonna check that while we looked at while you talk here. And is this your first time on an airplane kind of thing, at least for fighting?
I believe so. That no 90 in 96 I traveled with Ray Cooper to Japan, and he fought Suda.
Okay,
He fought
Masanori
Suda. Yeah, he fought Masanori Suda at I believe
Shudo.
that was at middleweight. He definitely was fighting way out of his weight class. Masanori Suda was a big guy.
Oh yeah, no joke, and no joke, future Shudo champion. So okay, but you'd already traveled accompanying a guy, but this is your first time traveling to Guam to fight. Now, even though Hawaii is out there in the Pacific, still a trip to Guam is no joke. That's a lot of time on an airplane, and talk about the traveling to fight now, because you're not the hometown boy. At least you don't have to sell tickets.
Well, you know what? It was funny you say that, because Guam was a little behind us. I would say way behind us, because already in Guam they was watching Super Bowl fights. So when I went to Guam, I was like a hometown favorite up there, because a lot of the Guamanians knew me, and then also John is from Guam, so he was a hometown favorite as well. So I think TJ set it up like that, knowing that we were gonna meet up in the finals, and we were flying up together on the same flight. I was with my brother-in-law, and I think John was with Barrett Yoshida, flying up with him at the time. So a bunch of Grappling Unlimited guys went up, and a few of us Jesus is Lord guys went up.
And the guys in Guam, when you get there are fighters there too. I remember a guy named Melchior.
Yes.
And a few guys like that were like pretty serious dudes that later became ensign students and things like that.
Yeah.
So you got a good reception in Guam. You enjoyed the trip?
I enjoyed myself, because like I said, it almost felt like it was at home. I mean, the Guamanians is like Hawaii fighters, Hawaii people. They just want to see a fight and see blood.
That's cool. Now let me ask you a question. And again, I already complimented you, and much respect. Did you bring your wife?
Yes. My wife came. My wife came with me on almost all my trips that I traveled. She was pretty much with me from day one.
Okay.
And she's really well educated in a fight game. So I would always hear her voice yelling in a crowd or in a corner. So her voice was real familiar to me.
Okay, and so your wife was actually a fighting wife kind of thing. Like she understands the game.
Well, we had our own when we branched off and started training and started our own school. Me, my brother-in-law, and my wife, we started 808 Fight Factory. She was training amateurs, so amateurs and people that came off the street just wanted to exercise. My wife was training people already, boxing, kickboxing, and doing some ground and pound and stuff.
So I did some research here. I know your daughter also fights, so you are a legit fighting family, brother.
Yes, yeah, she's living in Vegas now, so she's trying to make a run in her career, and but she had two little ones as well, so she's got a son and a daughter.
Awesome,
But
awesome.
yeah, she still got time. I think the time that she's starting now is about the time I think I started my career. So she's starting kind of late because she had the kids, but I think she got about a good 4 or 5 years to make it to where the women's MMA is just taking off. I think she can make a name for herself.
Okay, man, and that would just be awesome because, um, like you said, especially with your wife also being involved in stuff, it's like you guys have a little legacy going on there, and it would be great to see it continue, especially as a fan for me. Um,
All right.
so you had a good fight. Guam is a big trip. You come back home, Super Bowl 15. I looked it up. This one is Blaisdell Arena. You fight the Dongji. It looks like it's a single fight. What do you remember about this one? And this is only a month after the Guam show.
Yeah, I think at that time too, I believe TJ already um, started co-promoting and switched over to the Shuto. So when I came to Guam, a lot of the Japanese photographers and reporters came to that fight, and they started taking notice about our gym. Ray Cooper, myself, Bozo Paling. So they already was ranking us in the A class,
Yeah.
and was looking to move us guys up in the rankings and start fighting some of the Japanese fighters. So that's why they got me a quick turnaround and wanted me to start building my resume in the Shuto rankings. So I guess they saw something in me in that side, in that sense.
For sure. And that's much deserved. This is a nice evolution. And one of the things, again, that you got to give TJ credit for, you went from pure headbutts, foot stomping, brawling, like you said, just basically a street fight in the ring to Shudo, which was extremely organized with like things like the catch and things like that. How was your adjustment? Did you like that? Did you feel like there was progress being made?
I really appreciated the Japanese audience because it seemed like they were so knowledgeable about the ground game and moves and techniques. Because when we went to Japan, you couldn't hear a pin drop. I mean, it was that quiet. But when you had a takedown, a throw, a knockdown, a submission attempt, man, they clapped. They was like applauding. I mean, it was it
Or,
made
or,
you
or, or,
feel.
or you hear them go, oh.
Yeah. I can hear my corner so clear, and then you hear the Japanese corner. You just hear them screaming in Japanese, and I'll be telling my corner like, "Yeah, I got him." You could have a conversation with your cornerman, and I don't think they would know what you're talking about. But it was real. And the Japanese fans, they made you feel like a superstar. They run up to you, ask for your autograph, and they got magazines and cards. They was making all kinds of stuff, and I guess making money off of us in Japan because they had cards, posters. Now, I don't know if they made them, but they'd run up to us after the events or on the streets to sign magazines and posters and whatnot. So I came back home feeling like, yeah, I'm doing something good, man.
Yeah.
I guess I gotta get better and train and this time win when I go to Japan. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, and your next fight is in Japan in Shudo against Yuki Sasaki, another guy, 50 fights, a real pro. And like you mentioned, the experience. So in Hawaii, you're on the radio, you're Ronald Machine Gun John on the radio and stuff like that, and you're selling tickets and stuff. But it's not the kind of crowd that asks you for autographs and wants to take pictures and stuff. Is that correct?
I mean, they was cheering on their fighter, but still, yeah, the Japanese fans are loyal, man. They if they choose you as their favorite fighter, they'll come to you every time, win or lose. Sign this, take picture. You know what I mean? They're wild, man. And I believe that time we went, we saw Akebono and Musashi Maru in the crowd, and they were running to us, not them.
Awesome.
So I mean, that was just the MMA crowd. I mean, I'm pretty sure they got their judo or their sumo crowd, their fans, but the fans that was there was just strictly MMA fans. And they were just sitting down there. Hey, do your thing, brother. Do your thing. Go sign autograph. I talk to you after, brother. I talked to them. It was cool seeing them up there.
Now,
So,
you mentioned Akebono. This reminds me, I'm going to take you back to Super Bowl III because one of the biggest stars in sports was at that show, Shaquille O'Neal. Did you have any experience meeting Shaquille or anything like
oh
that?
man, I wish I met him, man.
Oh, you didn't meet him there?
The
Cool.
The Lakers would do their spring, kind of training for the NBA out there.
Oh,
So
in
that's
Hawaii.
how he ended up there. Yeah.
I think Shaquille is a big MMA guru.
Yeah.
Like he's a big fan of MMA, man.
Yeah.
For sure. And it goes back, and not a big fan like from, later on when the UFC got big, he watched it and liked it and stuff like that. He was at Super Bowl III, you know what I mean? So definitely a big experience, an interesting experience. And when you mention big stars like Akebono and things like that, and you feeling, at that level and stuff like that, it's nice to see that you got that buzz, that you got that experience, because to me, my mindset too also was that Ronald Jhun was a guy who paid his dues. You deserve having a moment like that. Now, what do you remember about the Sasaki fight? Because you got to the third round, and you did get armbarred or triangle armbarred, but again, Sasaki, and then you're fighting in his hometown and stuff like that. What do you remember about the whole experience in the fight?
Yeah, I mean the Japanese fighters, they're real technical. That's what I got out of the fight. I mean, he took me to a place in the fight where he was safe all the time. Really used his wrestling to neutralize my striking at the time, and his ground game was real slick. And he was tall. He was probably I would say about 6 feet 6'1", so almost like a James Zickett kind of body, kind of frame. So he caused some problems for me on the ground on that aspect. So just another notch in my arrow that I had to go back into the gym and really work on some stuff. And like I said, man, it was a sport that made me grow as a man, and taking out the losses as well as the wins. You know what I mean? It kind of built me up and made me the person I am today. So real appreciative for this sport, man.
Yeah, and this is not a bad performance. Getting to the third round in Shudo in Japan is definitely a feather in your cap. Now, let me ask you this. You said you've been to Japan before with Ray and the fight, but now you're fighting. Was this trip long? Was this trip hard on your body? Because Shudo brings you over. I mean, they're a great organization, but they are not big money. So they bring you over only a couple of days early and stuff like that. Was it something that you adjusted? The adjustment was hard?
Yeah, I think, with that bringing us up that week, it wasn't really too bad as far as the jet lag, because it's not like we really need to get adjusted. The only thing I can say about Japan, it smells like there's a lot of exhaust in the air. That's what I remember of it. Like driving in a city, there's a lot of people that smoke and a lot of carbon monoxide. So that's the one thing I remember. But so we pretty much stayed in the building, the hotels, and stayed pretty much out of the city. We went into the cities after to eat some ramen and whatnot. But most of the time we stayed in the hotel because it was only so short the trip. And we probably did some little traveling after the fight in the subways and going to the malls and whatnot. But bringing us up right there before the fight, where we just got to be up there one day, check in, do a little media, and then lose weight, weigh in, and then fight. I felt it was perfect at the time.
Okay.
Because
and the pollution affected you.
Yeah, it really was. It felt like the carbon monoxide was something that was that would have worked against anybody that came from outside. You know, so I don't think I was the only person. I think Todd can attest to that. I saw Todd going like this.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, a lot of smokers, a lot of vehicles,
Especially in the
trains.
90s, too. Like you're
Yeah.
still we're still a long time ago now. It's almost
right.
25 years. So very, very interesting. And you come back, you go back to the Blaisdell. Now here we've got TJ, kind of at the peak of his powers. The main event, I believe, is Dan Severn against Josh Barnett. You
Right.
know, and what you've got there with Josh Barnett is you've got him young, a future UFC champion, and he's Matt Hume's student. And you fight another Matt Hume student who I'm kind of familiar with, a guy named Kim Mason. I don't know if you know Kim Mason and where he wound up, but it's not a great story. Why don't you talk about this
I,
fight? Because he was very skilled.
um, I, I think it was maybe the Super Brawl before that. Um, that Kim Mason fought my brother-in-law Kai.
Okay.
So I don't know if it was that Super Brawl before or one before that, but I told TJ I wanted to rematch him for my brother-in-law. So that was kind of a guy I had my eyes on. So
Okay.
TJ Matt fight up.
And
It
he
was a
was
good
a
fight, standing fight. I remember that, a lot of standing
Yeah.
fight, and Ron landed some big shots as the fight went on. He's starting to land harder. You could see his face getting damaged.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kim was very skilled and very at the time one of Matt Hume's best students. What was were you aware of Hume and the reputation of these guys that were coming from the mainland there? Because Hume to me is kind of cream of the crop, like among the best trainers that we've ever seen.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that's who TJ was one of the guys he partnered up with to bring over AMC Pancration, and then I believe Monty Cox was another guy that he brought in, guys from the Midwest, along with Ken Shamrock from Lions Den, because I seen Jerry Bolander, I seen Trey Tallyman, um, what's that other guy's name that um,
Pete
Pete
Williams.
Williams, yeah.
Pete Williams.
Earlier, yeah.
Williams, come to find out, was working my father-in-law here down on the islands in the movies. I believe he was a cook, and he got real big as a heavyweight. So when we was training in Waipau in Leokane Street, 808 Fight Factory, Pete Williams came and trained with us a few times.
Yeah.
And I guess he couldn't get it in gear, man, because we threw him on the bag and he was kept gassing out. And I guess he told my father-in-law, yeah, man, I'm done, man. I'm done fighting, man. I'll stick to work.
Pete's a good guy. I've interviewed
Yeah.
him, and he went on to beat Mark Coleman for the UFC title. And he talks fondly about his time in Hawaii for sure.
Yeah.
And so now the Kim Mason fight. Do you know where Kim is right now?
Yeah. I mean, I heard stories he was in prison.
Yeah,
And
he killed the guy. He's still there. He's still in prison. I don't know if he's going to get out very soon. So it's an unfortunate thing. He fought for me in Hook and Shoot, and he had killed the guy like the week before, supposedly.
Right. That's the story I heard. So that was true.
Yeah. So, what do you think about things like that? Is it the kind of thing where it's like, wow, how do you feel about? Because fighting and you get to know each other. You get to respect each other. And Kim and you had a good, long, hard fight. And when you hear a guy go down that hard, what does that make you think? It must. I'm going to assume because of your religious background, must make you grateful.
It makes me feel like it was unfortunate that he went through some stuff in his life, and like I said, like when I started, before I got into the sport, I made some bad decisions, and that was probably the one decision he made that he can't take back. You know what I mean? I mean, taking someone else's life. I mean, you pretty much pulled your number and just ripped it up, and I mean, I was on my way that path, and but I chose the other way, and thank God I'm still here today and able to share my story.
Yeah, no, I'm
So,
I'm I'm grateful too. I having met Kim, um, yeah, I can only feel sadness. It's not a good story, and I'm not sure all the things going on, around it and stuff like that. He got into some dark stuff. So, when I get a story like you and that we're able to do an interview, 25 years later and stuff like that, that's uplifting. That's uplifting. I've been complimenting you. Now that I've been getting to know you a little better, I like you even more, brother.
appreciate it, man. Appreciate it, man. It's good to see Todd, man. I mean, I only see him on social media, and I said, bro, I know this. I remember this guy back in the Super Bowl days, man. You know what I mean? So he's an OG. He's an OG reporter.
Oh yeah. No, Todd and I, we're friends from the internet way back then, and now we work together and do things together and stuff like that. And there's no one more hardcore than Todd. No one.
Yeah.
And I say that with total respect. So, um, you know, uh, I appreciate that. So now you come back Super Bowl 17. We're talking Blaisdell Arena again. Now you're moving in to some real heady territory. This guy may be the best guy you ever fought, and that's Eric Paulson. I don't know if you felt that or anything like that, but he was Shudo champion. He's the guy who beat Masanori Suda, who Ray had fought, and held the belt for a long time, and eventually became Josh Barnett's next student. Josh went with him in California to study after he left Matt Hume, and Eric Paulson's an all-time fabulous fighter. What was your experience here?
Well, you know what was crazy? That fight, I was scheduled to fight Ivan Salaverry from AMC Pancration. Lance Gibson was scheduled to fight Eric Paulson for the, I guess the Shuto title. Lance Gibson, I believe, pulled out from a back injury or got injured. So TJ asked me, "Hey, you got to switch an opponent. You want to step up and fight Eric Paulson?" So I told him, "Okay, shoot, I'll fight him." And I believe Ivan Salaverry ended up fighting another teammate of mine, Augie Patakin. So that's how that fight came about. But I didn't know the extent of Eric Paulson. Like I said, we didn't have internet. There was no YouTube. They sent me a video of a few fights of him fighting all the top fighters in maybe 3 fights. Shuto sends me in 3 of his last fights. So Izu Takeuchi, Masanori Suda, and another guy, 3 of Shuto's top guys. And Eric pretty much handled them 3. So I felt like, yeah, I'm going against a submission specialist. And everyone was telling me, whatever you do not go to the ground with this guy. Keep it standing. And I still couldn't do that. This guy still had wrestling background as well. So he took me down, and it was basically a submission clinic. And on my end, it was basically a submission defense clinic because I got out of every submission he put me in.
You did. You made it all the way through. And just that is special because Paulson is the real deal. And to switch opponent, I'll tell you an interesting story. Ivan Salaverry and myself are very good friends because we're both from Chile in South America. So,
all right.
Yeah, so we speak in Spanish when he calls me viejo, old man. So that would have been an interesting fight too. Salaverry was no joke. He fought in the UFC as well, and you managed to avoid him. But Eric Paulson, a good. Now here comes another one of those Ronald Jhun winning streaks after the Paulson experience, and Sasaki. You got the Dungey win in between and stuff, but now Jason Von Flue, Jordan Klimt, JT Taylor, good fighters. Brian Sleeman. What do you remember about this run? Were you feeling? Yeah, this is 2000, 2001. Were you feeling like you were coming into your own? Were you feeling like you were waiting for the big opportunity? Where's the UFC in your mind as well? Are you waiting for the big phone call, or are you satisfied with fighting on the island?
I believe at that time we went out and traveled. I started fighting in IFC for Paul Smith. I don't know if you remember his name.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
Classic
I
fights
fought
too.
yeah, so I fought in IFC, Gladiators Challenge, King of the Cage. I started traveling around the states, and that's where we started 808 Fight Factory at that time, because we was Jesus and Lord up into, I forget which fight, but we started. I felt like I needed to invest more in my training, and then I needed to get more experience outside of Hawaii, and so that's why we went out from Hawaii to fight Super Brawl and started fighting on a lot more mainland circuits. And I felt like I started getting more comfortable in that sense, because I was thinking, if I'm going to make it to the UFC, I need to be going out there and fighting outside talent as well, and fighting in these different crowds instead of just fighting at home.
Okay, now let's talk some real business here. The money's not great. Are you?
No.
How much are you investing? How much are you thinking? Are you thinking you're going to make the big time so that you get your money back? Because at this point, you're probably spending some of your own money to go do some of these fights. At least do them well with your training partners and everything like that. What was the finances around this? What were you also working?
I through my whole, even till today, I'm still working. So I worked through my whole fighting career. So when I was competing, it was, to me, honestly, it was never about the money. It was a lifestyle, and it was
A
only
personal
positive.
challenge.
There was only positive stuff that was coming out of this thing, and I think it was more of a character building stage in my life, where the fighting molded me and created this man I am today. So that's why I said I'm real grateful for the sport, because I wish the money was then like how it is now. But the way I looked at it, we were the guys that paved the way for the generation that's fighting now. And some of the guys who's fighting now, they give us props and say, Uncle Ron was one of the guys who laid the foundation for us, so I gotta give him props. And some of them just don't really know the history of MMA. And hopefully if they see this podcast, they'll know that, hey, what I did was for the future of our sport. You know what I mean? For the rest of the Hawaiians.
There's a saying that the guys now maybe are standing on the shoulders of giants. You know what I mean? And you guys definitely, what you said about paving the way, definitely, you can't get enough credit, and you're not getting the credit you deserve, but you can't get enough credit for all that. It really is exactly what you said, that if you hadn't paid those dues, the sport might not be as big,
Exactly, man. That my end goal was the UFC, because before we started, me and my brother-in-law Ray used to be sitting down on the weekends, popping back a couple heinies and watching the UFC in the early stages, and just thinking like, hey, imagine one day we wasn't there. That would be crazy, yeah? And that day I made my walk out to Bruce Buffer and got into the cage. I didn't even fight, but just standing in the cage, it was like, I made it, man. I made it to the Super Bowl. That's the way I felt. And
okay, we're gonna get up to that fight here in a little bit. But here now, to be honest, we talked a little bit. You had a good winning streak, and to me, these next three fights: Joe Stevenson, Dave Strasser, Pete Spratt, that may be the best run of your career. Especially if you look at the quality of the opponents, they're all solid guys and things. And you went 3-0 against top-notch guys in the States in competition that were known. You deserve to be in the UFC at this point. Is that talk about this run and how you were feeling? How focused were you?
I tell you what, at that time, MMA in Hawaii was booming. Our camp, a lot of good fighters that came out of Hawaii came out of our school. So we had a good system. My father-in-law was our conditioning guy, our strength and conditioning guy. So my father-in-law, he don't get enough credit. We all know him as Pops Kamaka. Ron know him as Pops, and he had an eye for watching my fights. And then every time I'll come back to the lab, he would work on some footwork. He would work on some hand-eye coordination. He would work on some movement. And everything about him was being mobile, not being stationary. So my father-in-law was ahead of his time. And I think at that time, like I said, we had the perfect formula. And I was just that lab rat that was just trying out different stuff and different techniques and putting everything together. You know what I mean? So I felt like I was at a good place in my career at the time.
Yeah, and at this point, you know, there's no doubt you were one of the top 10 guys in one of the most crowded weight divisions. You were a very, very dangerous fighter at this point and deserve a lot more credit. Now, in here, you fight Jermaine Andre, and Jermaine was no joke. He's another Midwest guy, a serious physique, you know, maybe on some juice. And then Takeuchi, and then Suda. So it kind of you took a little bit of a losing streak there. Talk about what that did to your mentality and your preparation, because you were kind of on a 6 or 7 fight winning streak. Strasser, Joe Stevenson, serious guys, and then now also maybe a little smaller. Like you belonged. What's your best weight class?
Welterweight.
Yeah,
So
you're a 170 pounder.
Yeah, so at that time I was fighting all of them at middleweight.
Yeah.
So, and my diet back then was easy on the rice, no gravy, take out the salad, give me a Diet Coke. That was my meal prep. You know what I mean? Local style meal prep. But then that was for me, make 185. It was a drop in a bucket. So when I made them after that, I believe I made the move to welterweight. And that was my I would say ideal weight class that I should have been fighting at.
Yeah.
Especially with the talent pool, the way everyone started learning and training different disciplines. The fighters to me felt like was a lot more competitive.
Yeah, I mean, Suda and Takeuchi, this is 2 Japanese guys, workhorses, and also much bigger than you. Talk about those fights as a learning experience, because you go back to Japan, Takeuchi is a majority decision, and Suda is a majority decision, which means one of the judges at least had a tie or for you. Well, what do you remember about those fights? Because you were in the neighborhood, man. You were at the top of the game.
I think the Suda fight too, I took it on a short notice, but I was always in the gym training. So it seems like I was always in camp. If I didn't take too much leg damage or any cuts or anything, Saturday fight, Monday I'm back in the gym training. You know what I mean? That was, like I said, it was a lifestyle for me. So the Suda fight, it was a last minute fight. And I had some moments where I felt like I could have turned the fight and beat him. And, you know, after the fight, he kind of raised my hand like he felt like he lost. You know what I mean? Because he was a champion. So they told me if I beat him, we would have a rematch and I'll be fighting for the title. So that's the reason why I took that fight.
Yeah, it just
it was just a
so
little
close,
short,
so close, man.
Yeah.
You know, and those are great experiences too, because like you said, a guy with your kind of cerebral approach, you learn from that stuff. You know what I mean?
Yes, most definitely, man. Like I said, man, I was a firm believer as I didn't really learn too much from my wins. I feel I learned a lot more from my losses. And I'd go back and watch my tapes and I'd see the places that I made the mistakes and try to come back and make corrections. Try not to make the same mistake again in the next fight.
Yeah. And now something unusual happened here, and that is that we're at Super Bowl 26, and TJ, again, I think he's doing his corroboration at this point with Stefan Patry, the Canadian promoter, and they bring you Stefan Potvin, who was one of their top guys. And, you took a loss at home here, which you had gotten out of that win loss thing in Hawaii, and you were owning this stuff. Well, what did this fight do to you? What'd you think? It was a little bit of a losing streak here, and you know that had to motivate you.
It really did. It kind of made me go back and sit down and kind of like go. But my wife would probably be the person to tell me I go home and have a pity party, and she'd be the one like, "Come on, man, you better than that. You made this small mistake, and look who you fought with." And she was the one that was always telling me the truth and tell me the things that I needed. I wouldn't say I needed to hear. I would say that, yeah, I needed to hear that because everybody else would say, you did good, man. You did. She said, no, you messed up. You did this wrong. You did, and she'd tell me all the stuff, and I would take that, and I would just dwell on it. I'll come back and say, you know what, that would motivate me. So anytime she would give me that wife and husband talk, I think I needed some of that. So, like I said, my wife is a behind the scenes type of person. She doesn't like to be in the camera, but she's well knowledgeable about the fight game. And to this day, still training kids and teenagers and young folks and people who still want to get into the fight game. So she's still doing her thing.
That's awesome. That's and definitely, they say behind every good man is a good woman, right? So it's very interesting, and that's very insightful stuff that she gave you. And now you come back. Again, you're at the top level of competition at this point. You fight Shoney Carter, Dennis Hallman, 2 draws in a row. What's going on here? What do you think of those fights? Because Shoney Carter's got probably 200 fights, and Dennis Hallman's probably got 100. So actually, you're a super experienced guy. You're fighting guys more experienced than you, training and at the highest level. What does 2 draws do to you? You don't have a lot of draws in your career until this moment. And, you go into a tough fight and get a draw. How does that feel?
It feels like I almost won. But the fight with Shoney, it could have went either way. It was razor close, man. He had his moments. I had my moments. It was for the, I believe it was for the super broad title, welterweight title. We fought to a draw, and the Dennis Hallman fight, they gave me the win. I won that fight, but on paper, they still got me down as a draw. So I went through Sure Dog and whatnot to try to change that blemish and change it to. I had to go through all kinds of channels. I gave up, but that fight, I ended up winning. At the event, Terry Treblecock gave me the win, which is why I ended up fighting Shoney Carter in Vegas for the welterweight world title.
And we'll get to that. Now, what did you think of Hallman? You think you won the fight? Obviously, you did. You beat him.
Yeah, I mean, he got me in a triangle in the first round. I powered out of it, and then second round, I totally dominated him.
Now, Hallman's a guy. I'm really good friends with Dennis as well, and I've interviewed him, and now at the end of his career, Dennis beat Matt Hughes twice in less than a minute. He's got the most dangerous first 3 minutes, but if you survive that, you got him, kind of thing. If you're talented, he's very talented, but if you getting out and powering out of his submission in the first, you could almost be like, all right, Ronald's got this one, man.
Yeah, I mean, man, my corner was yelling all the stuff, what to do, but I was like, I ain't getting caught in this triangle. I already know this triangle, so once I got out of that, it was like, okay, the fight's mine now. I got this fight. But we only did 2 rounds because I believe the week before he fought Frank Trigg in WFA.
Okay.
So that was kind of I don't know what it was with the scheduling, but I believe we were scheduled to fight, and I'm not sure if that was I can't say that was a last minute fight. I think back then you could fight every week if you wanted to.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And that's the problem with some of these guys. Like you didn't suffer that much, although we did see that, you went to Japan, came back and fought a month later. Guys like Dennis at times fought every couple of weeks or less, and a lot of that is
Yeah.
because of money. And
Right.
a lot of that is because, whatever pride and because they win a lot, So it's like you're
Yeah.
fighting lesser guys, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, I'm facing Ronald Jhun. That's not a lesser guy, So you know what I mean? So
Right.
those guys really also paid their dues. That's another one of those guys that the guys nowadays owe a debt of thanks to.
Yeah.
Now,
Most
here, after those two draws, you get into another one of your winning streaks. Mike Penambler, James Meals, another relatively serious fighter. And then the Shoney Carter fight in King of the Cage, which you said was for a title. Talk about that streak for you.
It made me seem like I got back on the horse and started doing my due diligence as far as training and stepping up my game. And I already knew if I wanted to get into the UFC, I needed to put together a string of fights against some noticeable fighters. And I felt like at that time I was on the right track again, and fighting guys who have probably fought in the UFC. And it just seemed like I was doing the right things at the right time.
And talk about the Shoney Carter fight, because you won it. So you held the King of the Cage title.
Yes.
So what do you remember about that fight? Decision win. So Shoney's a guy, like I said, he's got, I don't know how many fights on the internet, but he used to be a guy that fought people out of the crowd in a bar, 5-6 fights in a night kind of guy, in the Midwest. So about the most experienced guy, but also really highly skilled, because he was very practiced in what he did, which was wrestling and striking.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that matchup?
To be honest, man, it was fighting Shoney Carter. It felt like I was fighting myself, man. He didn't quit, kept fighting to the end. I was one of those soldiers. We became brothers after the fights, man. You know what I mean? Just blood brothers. I mean, me and him, Eric Paulson, Pete Spratt, all these wars. I mean, you become instant brothers, man. John Alicio, all these top fighters. It's what we do, and it's like almost like gladiators, and you get a sense of respect for each other. And I think that was one of the things that I kind of loved about the sport, because it was meeting people, but I didn't see it as going out there and punching each other's face. To me, honestly, I felt like a sport to me. There was just some dangers in it, that you could get knocked out, you could get your arm broken, you could get your ankle or knee snapped, but that was part of the sport. You know what I mean? So
the camaraderie is something a lot of the old school guys talk about, because like when you're doing it for no money or anything like that, there was a different feeling where you're finding out about yourself as a man.
yes.
As a matchmaker, I remember an experience where I had a Russian guy and a Norwegian guy fighting in the Trump Taj Mahal one time.
Right.
Good fight. And then later on after the fight, I go to the bar and they're together drinking shots. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing, where that's the kind of respect that you earn with those guys. And that's a feeling that I can watch and observe, but it's so special for you and for those guys. No one can touch that. You know what I mean? It's really, when I see it, I love it. I just respect it way, way, way too much.
I mean, at that fight, when I was fighting Shoney, it was in Vegas at the
Sin City, King of the Cage.
It was a New Orleans, and at that fight, I seen ringside. I believe it was Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz. I think I saw Dana White. They all came to that fight. So I believe I think I seen Dana White a few times in Hawaii at ringside watching the Super Bowls.
Okay, Dana used to put in the work.
Had a nice proper hair at that time. That was Dana White with hair.
Now, there are a couple of fights on your record that were canceled And I want to ask you how you think they would have gone. Because, again, just the cream of the crop, top shelf guys. Jake Shields,
Yes.
a jiu-jitsu wizard, and a guy that in MMA also took his career to a real high level. This fight didn't happen, but what was your preparation for it? How did you think it would go?
I was doing a lot of wrestling and jiu-jitsu. I mean, grappling for that fight. Um, I thought it would have been an awesome fight. I believe Jake is younger than me. When I was coming up in King of the Cage, I believe I was the guy that everybody was after. So I think Jake Shields had his eye on me at the time when I was at the top of King of the Cage, and I think I was somebody that he wanted to lock horns with and test himself against. So he was a young, hungry Jake Shields at the time.
Now,
So,
when you fought Shoney, you won the title, and you mentioned John Alessio as one of those top-notch guys. Alessio fought for the UFC title against Pat Miletich back in the old days. Alessio, another guy that didn't get credit. Did you lose your title to Alessio?
yes.
Talk
I
about that
believe,
fight. Another decision loss.
yeah, I mean, Alessio knew already that probably I had the striking advantage over him. So he pretty much took me down at will every time I went to take his head off. So it was I don't know how much times he took me down, but they stood it up. The crowd wasn't having it. They wanted to see two guys, and I believe it was fighting at Saboba Casino in California. It
Yeah.
was a big crowd they had that night. But yeah, John beat me for the title at that time. So
He beat you, but
props to
he
him.
didn't impress the crowd.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he did what he did to win the fight, and I gotta give him his props. He did his homework on, I guess, scouting me and staying away from the danger. I mean, he could have stood toe to toe and played a gambling match, rolled the dice and see what happens. But I should have known better that he was gonna switch up his game and take me down and nullify my stand up on him.
Now, at some point here, you got the Alessio loss, but then you start picking it up against Sean Taylor, Andrew Chappelle, Kyle Breeze, Ryan Schultz. Ryan Schultz, a guy out, trained by Matt Lindland, Randy Couture, those guys. Now, I believe you get the call to go to the UFC. And your first opponent, if I'm not mistaken, was supposed to be Robbie Lawler.
Yeah, it was Robbie Lawler and I believe at middleweight. And Joe Silva called me up, said Robbie Lawler is out. He got a shoulder injury or something. They said, but we got a replacement. We got the New York Bad A, Phil Baroni. So I said, okay, yeah, I'll do that one, Joe. Calls me back. I don't know how long, a week or two later. Phil Baroni's out. He got the shingles. We're possibly looking at you and Eugene Jackson at 185. So okay, so now mind you, I'm bulking up. I'm eating. I'm lifting weights. I'm probably walking on 200 pounds. They call me back. Eugene's out. We got another guy for you, Chris Lido. I said okay, but only thing is gonna be at welterweight, 170. So I'm like, okay, hang up the phone, immediately start running, man. I got a problem now. I gotta lose weight. I'm too heavy. So the whole camp was about cutting weight. You know what I mean? And I believe I had 2 weeks at the time. I believe 2 or 3 weeks to cut weight. And I was heavy, muscled. So it was a kind of bad experience on that part because they switched up the opponent, so I had to switch up my whole game.
Now,
So
is that something you think back on? And I don't know if regret's the right word, or that you had bad luck or whatever, because this is what you've been waiting for, is the call from the UFC. And then, with TJ, and like we'll say it like it is. You sold tickets for TJ. TJ took care of you a little bit. You know what I mean? You didn't have a lot of switched opponents. You didn't have to deal with these types of problems. How did that feel? Like you get to the big time and that's all of a sudden you're getting treated like shit.
I think I went through it so much, and it feels like because now it felt like I was in camp. It felt the Shoney Carter fight. It was actually felt like that was my first camp that I was bringing boxers in. The focus was on me and me only. Wasn't training on. We was training as a team, but the focus was more on me. So I kind of got the sense of how a camp feels like. And then all of a sudden they started changing opponents. So it kind of was frustrating at first, but I just said, hey, it's a fight game, man. I got to deal with it. It took my mind off the fighting, and it really focused me on trying to diet and cut weight and really hone in on my intake and making sure that I'm training properly. But I think back now, it was kind of frustrating at the time going through all those opponents and getting to Vegas in my first big event, the event I always wanted to be in. And I think back, I wish things was different, but I guess that's just how the cookie crumbled for my career. You know what I mean?
Here's the problem is Chris Lytle ain't bad. You know what I mean? It's like you're going to face top-notch guys there, forced to, like you said, concentrate on weight loss and not technique and things like that against a guy like that. How good was Chris Lytle?
He was another guy like I was fighting myself, man. I mean, like I said, as the years went by, the more top tier guys I fought, it seemed like everyone was getting a lot better, a lot better. The competition was getting stiffer. But I liked it. For me, it was more about the challenge, challenging myself and not fighting somebody I know I'm supposed to beat, but fighting against and possibly beating someone that's supposed to beat me. Because I always felt like every fight I went into, I was the underdog. You know what I mean? I always had to prove something. I had to prove that I was worth being there. That they made the right choice to put me in the biggest circuit in the world. So no matter if I was a favorite or not, I always saw myself as an underdog, knowing that I didn't train under Helsing Gracie or Ken Shamrock or Tito Ortiz. I didn't have no big name trainers, that I was training on. It was just a bunch of local boys that started off in the back of my brother-in-law's house and went to a backyard gym that made it to the highest level in this game. And if we could do it, anybody could do it. Look at Max Holloway, man. They did it from the back of the garage, and all these guys, Colin McKenzie, them was all John Bernard, them, and look at John Bernard in bare knuckle fighting, going out there and showing what the local boys is capable of doing. And now, but he's living in, I believe, North Carolina, but still carries that Hawaiian mentality, knowing where he came from and never forgetting where he came from. Makes me proud. Makes me proud to see him going out there doing his thing, man.
Yep. I'll tell you a Chris Lytle story. I booked him for a fight in a Legion Hall in Indiana. 400 or 500 people, 400 or 500 people, but he fought a guy named CJ Fernandez, who was Jermaine Andre's main training partner. And CJ picked him up and slammed him in the first minute of the fight, broke his clavicle, and 7 minutes later, he submitted him. And I paid him.
With what, his 10-finger guillotine?
He got him in a triangle. But I paid him $400 and he broke his clavicle. You know what I mean? It's like that's and so when Chris Lytle, you say that it's like fighting yourself. It very much is. It's men of a different cloth that deserve respect. Now, why do you think that you didn't get another shot at the UFC? What happened there? Because sometimes, Joe Silva was a guy that every once in a while showed a little class. And when he couldn't take care of a guy like yourself that paid dues, and I know he liked you, watching those Super Bowl fights and stuff, it couldn't be something that, he thought, he's not worth it. Why'd you never get a call back? What happened there?
I to be honest, I don't have. It said on the contract it was a 3-fight deal, but in so many fine prints, it said that they had the option as a company to drop me at any times if I lost, no matter first fight, second fight, they could drop me at any time. It wasn't a guaranteed 3-fight deal. So I guess they didn't like what they saw, and Chris finished me. So I guess, and Dana just told me, hey, you get back on a win streak, you get 3 good wins back, we'll have you back in the UFC. So that's all I was searching for after that trip to the UFC, was getting back on a win streak and making my return and coming back even stronger.
Okay.
And I guess that day never came. So that was my one.
You started towards the end of your career, and we've gone through a great career with up until this point. Towards the end of your career, you did start to take a lot of losses. Was there a situation where you stopped taking it seriously? Did you and again, always fighting tough guys, Jason Miller, Jay Herrion, Talis Latis. You fought Frank Trigg, McKee. You had a cancel fight with Jose Pele. Crazy names, but I don't know if you want to say that you dropped off a little bit, or it wasn't going your way. What happened? Was it something where maybe the miles were getting to your body, or were you injured, or?
You know what? I never went through training without having a broken toe. My knee, but I pretty much trained and fought my whole career with some injuries, and I'm pretty sure every other fighter out there in the world can attest to this. There was never a fight that I went in that was 100%. But I think it was a lot of wear and tear on my body. And after I got in the UFC, it seemed like I got calls from promoters all over the world wanting me to fight high-level fighters. And I pretty much had to pick and choose, who I was fighting. But there was no in my my vocabularies. They gave me an opponent, I take the fight on a drop of a dime. So I think that's what TJ knew about me. He could just spring a fighter's name to me, and I wouldn't say, let me get back to you. I'll tell him, yeah, I'll fight him. When we fighting? When's the date? And sign me up. So I was that type of fighter.
Yep. Now, at what point did you decide to hang it up? Because, after a little while, like you said, your daughter fights now. You kind of pass the torch on. When did you know that you were finished, that you didn't want to do this anymore? Or do you still kind of want to do it?
To be honest with you, man, I'm going to be 54 this year. I still want to fight, man. I guess if you're a fighter at heart, you'll always be a fighter. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. If you ain't got a wife like mine, who tell you, babe, man, not for it, man. The kids don't want us. It was my last fight, I believe I did here in Hawaii. I was 43 years old, and I fought a guy from Washington, Dave Cochain.
Okay.
I forget what event it was in.
Destiny MMA.
Destiny, that's right. I had that fight scheduled, and then I had a fight in PXC schedule where I fought a guy who could have been my son. He was 23, I was 43. I believe he was the 1FC middleweight champion. He was a guy from Swedish, Muay Thai kickboxer.
Sebastian,
yes.
He was
Karestan, yes, that was the guy. That was my last 2 fights. And my 2 youngest girls saw me fight here in Hawaii, and they was only babies when I was fighting. When they came up to me, saw my nose broke, and saw me in the back of the locker room, and they was crying and told me, Dad, we don't want you to fight anymore. I had to really take a look at myself and say, do I really want to put my kids to this? You know what I mean? I ain't a young spring chicken. I mean, it's a young man's sport. So I had to take a real hard look at myself, man, and say, is it really worth it putting my kids to this? Because I could go through it, but I couldn't see my kids crying and looking at their father and just looking at me like that. So I mean, I had to take a real hard look at myself and tell me, I think that the time's passed me up already.
Okay, and much respect to that. Now, did you said your wife played into that decision? You said earlier in the interview, you said that she was the one that kind of was the realist, like realistic, like get you. Did she have an influence on the retirement?
Yeah, she was kind of telling me, I think it's done, babe. You know, I think, and those words she said, man, it kind of like she sees me, she see the way I train, and she saw me getting hit. I couldn't take punches. I mean, when you're young, I took knees, I took punches, and I'll just eat them. I think Pete Spratt hit me with a knee in my jaw. I didn't even feel it, and as the years went by, and I got hit in the temple. I was in my late 30s, early 40s, and I'd get flash knockdowns, which I wouldn't have when I was younger. So I kind of say it's a young man's sport. And you see it nowadays in the UFC. A lot of the Shogun Huas and Vanderlei Silvas and Anderson Silvas, you kind of see them.
Chuck Liddell.
Chuck Liddell. I mean, you know what I mean? Going on the street where they're getting just hit and getting knocked out. So everyone goes through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So
how do you feel? Do you feel like how many concussions do you think you had in your career?
I think the concussion started from Little League playing football. But
okay.
I believe I had some concussions where I didn't really know, because I'm sitting in a corner and I'm getting my water and my corner's talking to me, and I kind of like looking around like, wow, I'm at a fight right now. So I kind of felt like I went out, I came back, and then I right back into action again. So I feel like a lot of fighters, without these referees being knowledgeable about recognizing that if you see a fighter's eyes glossy, red, only the referee can tell if this person is out of his mind, like he's not there. And we really don't see it. But you as a fighter, you're going to keep fighting until someone pulls the person off of you. So sometimes you see the referee stopping a fight. It's their job to keep for make it a safer sport. And a lot of people like myself, I get mad sometimes, but I think, the referee is the closest guy that can see what's going on in there. And he's seeing that the fighter's eyes is red and rolled back and got a glare to it where you know you're knocked out. So much respect to the judges and referees nowadays that got to make a hard decision and sometimes stop the fight, even though that fighter can get a one-punch knockout. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles for this sport, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you a story about a knockout on one of Dave Strasser's shows, where I helped Dave match make a bunch of shows. Guy got dropped hard. Fight's over. The doctors are there. They're checking him, and he's standing in his corner, with his hands on the ropes. And he's like, "No, I'm fine. Don't worry. I'm fine. I'm fine." And the doctor goes, "How old are you?" And he goes, 6, 7, 8.
He knocked him back that far. He's thinking about his child.
Yeah. So yeah, what you guys suffer in there, And here's the good thing is, you're gonna be 54. You said. I think we're about a month separated. I was born August of 70, and I think you're September of 70, right? So
yes.
But this has been a great interview. You're still totally there, and some guys are suffering out there. You know what I mean? So even though you got your 50 fights in and that sort of thing, you did make it through to the point where you're still in good ground and stuff, and you're still healthy, and you still have a lot to teach and a lot to show. So I'm very grateful for all that. You know what I mean? It's a good thing, and I'm sure you are too.
No, I appreciate, man. I appreciate Todd reaching out to me, and it was a good conversation. He said we was gonna have fun. I knew I was gonna be bringing up some past, and you pretty much brought back the past, and there was some good moments, some bad moments, you know. But that was my I would say my career. It was a
Yeah.
roller coaster ride for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A lot of ups, a lot of downs. But I enjoyed it. And like I said, it shaped me to be the man I am today.
And that's the reason I do this, is because if I don't, who's going to do this? You know what I mean? Because your story, you gave us gold this whole interview. You know what I mean? I honestly believe that, because that's your story. It was very personal. There's a very nice angle to it, and you know, there's no way that should not be told. You know, there's no way that
Yeah.
these stories should just fade away. And you know, you're still younger and healthy and stuff, but we've been losing guys. You know what I mean? It's like I'm never gonna get a chance to interview Art Jimerson, and that
Yes.
type of thing hurts. You know what I mean? So
Yes. Yes.
it was great to spend this time with you, and I'm grateful to have met you, Ronald. Man, you're a gentleman, and Todd, take it away.
No, I want to ask one thing, because there isn't much events out in Hawaii these days. What's going on?
You know, with the state and everything, with they're trying to legalize it and build a commission and everything. It really it's not like before, because the state regulates everything, but it's so expensive to put on an event, to get your license. The tournaments you gotta pay so much money, and promoters don't want to pay for all of that, because a lot of fighters pull out. You know, they rather have the fighters, unless you work something out with them personally on the side. But there's so much money that goes into it. That's why TJ Thompson stopped putting on events. And I even told him before, I saw him at one of the Bellators, and I told him, hey, TJ, when you gonna put on an event? He said, nah, never. I'd rather put on a grappling event. Don't cost me way more. I make way more money doing a grappling event than putting on an MMA event. So there's a lot of money. You need somebody with deep pockets to really help you. And if we had someone with just crazy money that needed a tax write-off, Hawaii would be the best place to put on fights, man. You know what I mean? Bringing fighters all over again. And because Hawaii is like the main hub that everybody wants to come to. And everybody's trying to rekindle that same fire that Super Brawl had.
Never gonna happen.
Follow that same recipe that TJ had. You know, bringing the local boys up with a storyline, bringing in all these big time fight schools, and filling up the Blaisdell Arena. I remember that thing being filled up to the rooftop. You know, and we can never get it back to where it was.
Yeah, no, the commissions mess up a lot of things in many states. Wisconsin, there are a lot of states where, you know, they ask for like a $10,000 bond from the promoter. Yeah. So you got to come up with, you know, cash just to get your license for the show, and then every fighter, everything like that. It becomes very stressful, and I don't blame a lot of people for not wanting to go through that. But
yeah.
We have we're getting here towards the end, and you know, Ronald Jhun, thank you for a walk down memory lane. Thank you for a walk through a magical time, because Hawaii was definitely a special place for MMA, especially in the very beginning. And your stories and your personal story is something I'm grateful for. Thank you very much, brother.
No, thank you, Miguel, for having me. And like I said, man, there was a walk down memory lane. It's good to see Todd, my boy Todd Atkins over here, man. He, with this guy, there's a lot of memories at Super Brawl. You know, this guy used to always support us as local boys coming up, and I wouldn't have to defend myself. This guy would defend me on whatever platform there was. So I gotta give this guy props too, man. So you know, but
Todd
yeah,
Todd was smart. He'd leave the fighting to you, and then the fighting on the internet he'd take care of.
Todd was like the keyboard warrior.
All right, brothers. Thank you very much.